I wanted to do a little video on showing some of the turning tools that I use on the Mazak Integrex, and maybe explain a little bit of my reasoning behind choosing a certain style of tools. Now these over here are the Sandvik Capto mount tools, and I use these on the Integrex because you have to, because the spindle is actually this size. It's a C8 spindle, and then you can adapt down. This goes down to a C6 and to the boring bar. But you'll notice in looking at all these tools here, I kind of stick with a certain style of inserts for pretty much all of them. For one reason is, if you use too many inserts, you got to stock too many inserts. So I try to limit the styles of inserts to a CNMG, DNMG, although I don't use very many DNMGs, mostly a CNMG and a VBMT or a VNMG like this one is here. And then for grooving, I generally go first to this top-notch style of insert. I think Kennametal was the first one that came out with this, but now there's other versions of it. And for threading, I pretty much try to use these lay-down style inserts. This is a Sandvik version one here, and I think this is a I don't know, Vardex or something like that. Pretty much all the insert suppliers make this version of a threading tool nowadays. Although the Sandvik's slightly different. Oh, I don't have the insert out of here, but it has notches in the bottom of the insert to kind of help it register to the pocket on these. And for square shank tools, of course, these are the standard kind of lathe square shank tools. And I can mount those in the Integrex in a holder like this, which adapts to a square shank tool holder. This is a threading holder, of course, in here. And then here, man, that's hard to lift up for me now after that car accident. It's a parting off tool that goes straight to a C8 connection on this one. Has to be adapted with an connection kind of like this that adapts C8 to C6, because this has a C6 or Capto number 6 shank on it. The shanks, the Capto shanks go down, I don't know how small they go, maybe number 3 or number 2, something. This one is a number 4, I believe, on this one. Or maybe it's a 5, let me see. No, it's a C5. This is a 5, and then it goes down to a number 4, I think is the smallest ones I have, where you can adapt collet chucks and stuff onto these bigger adapters like this. But going back to the style of inserts here, there's kind of a reasoning behind what I use as far as the machining goes. See, this is a 80-degree diamond positive rake insert, and this is a positive rake, like I said, VBMT insert, where this one's a negative rake, VNMG. And there's a difference between these two if you're doing ID work. A lot of oil field parts like I'm machine on have thread relief grooves, and they specify a 45-degree angle going down the thread relief, and then you'd have a straight turn and then that back face out to whatever is behind the thread relief. And when you're dealing with a VNMG insert, there isn't enough clearance on the back side of this strictly to go down a 45-degree angle on an ID bore if the bore is just a little bigger than the tool fits into, because this insert is tipped down and forward into its cutting direction, which is this way on the boring insert. And because they tip it forward like this, it kicks this back end out a little bit, and it can cause it to rub back here. So you have to grind this off if you're going to use this style insert. This is oftentimes what the guys here in the shop do if they're using this V&MG insert on an ID, and then you kind of you know, make the value of the 4 cutting edges, you kind of screw that up because you can't use that cutting edge once you grind on this. So that's one of the reasons I like to use the VBMT insert, because I can actually walk down a 45-degree angle in a bore with this properly. You could do it with this V&MG, but it kind of rubs on the backside in certain circumstances, and then it kind of messes the finish up a little bit. So that's one of the reasons, and I like to use a V-style insert, whether it's this one or that one, for finishing, because oftentimes if this is an OD tool, let's just imagine, I don't have an OD, well, yeah, here, let's just look at this square shank tool holder. If this is an OD tool coming down the diameter here, and the shavings come up and wrap around the back of the tool, or behind the tool, I should say, on the work, if you have very little clearance, like let's say you're imagining a V&MG insert turning down an OD diameter, let's just take this bar as an example, and you see how little clearance there is behind the insert? Well, the shavings can get up in there and mar up the finish if you're going down it like this. Whereas if you have a tool like this, you can see that if the shavings get behind the tool, they can wrap up behind there, but it really doesn't get jammed between the holder, the insert, the holder, and everything, and cause a finish problem. That's another reason I like to use this style of tool for finishing. Although you could also use this one, you know, and it would have more clearance, this 55-degree diamond, and that would work also with this one. Although I don't have lots of this style insert, because again, as I said in the beginning, I wanted to limit the number of inserts I have to keep in stock. This is where you can get into trouble. You have tooling suppliers come in and they show you the latest and greatest. You say, oh man, I want to try that and I want that. But then you have to have those inserts if you're going to use the tool. So you kind of got to, it's kind of like camera equipment, you know, you want every lens and everything, but then you end up only using a few lenses and you got all this other stuff that you don't really need. And tooling is kind of the same way. It's a, you know, you want to have all the neat things, but in reality, it just ends up having to stock a bunch of junk. And I put these boring bars back here. These are silent bars, and these are obviously expensive items. I mean, if you're just, you know, doing machine work in your garage, you're not going to buy one of these because it costs as much as your machine, at least like a bar like this does. So you're not going to really want to buy it. But for doing machine work for a living, you know, like production machine work, these bars, I don't know if you can read that, the silent bar, they always put these 3 dots on here and then it says Silent Tools Sandvik. These, at least in my experience, work the best of all of these kind of devibrators, silent bars, or whatever you want to call them. These really work good. The only issue with these is that they flex. So you can't, unless it's a short one, maybe like this one, but these longer ones, they'll flex when they cut. They don't vibrate or chatter, but they flex. So you can't just run a part and then the next part just use the same settings you finished with on the boring cycle. You got to back off the offset and approach it again the same way you did before. And you could put this all in the program, I guess, if you really want a high production rate, but I normally just back off the offset down on a bore and then I work back up to it, because the parts I work on are usually expensive parts, and I just don't want a chance scrapping expensive material. But they flex, you know, and they'll bend away from the cut. So if you go in there with the same setting you finished with last time, chances are it might cut oversize. It's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of like the bar flexes. Not only does it flex away from the cut, but it flexes down a little bit too. and this can cause it to be down on the diameter, and it can cut oversized. You gotta kind of be careful with these tools in that respect. But once you use them, you say, man, I don't ever want to go back to a standard boring bar again. That's how good they work. So that's I'm just was showing these tools that I use, and the reason, now you don't see, for instance, a triangular insert. I do have a few triangular inserts, although I don't even have a tool that'll hold this insert because it was sent to me by mistake, a box of them. But I don't generally use these triangular tools. I'm not saying they don't work, and it's perfectly fine for certain things, maybe finished tools. But I don't think that the pocket has enough stability for my liking, because if you have this tool in here, well, let's see. Like let's just take, for instance, this. Imagine that this turning insert was in this threading inserts tool. You see how very little support this has. Actually, you're pushing against this. On a threading operation, the threading operation is a light force. It's not that heavy, so it's okay. But on this tool, if you were turning hard, like really roughing hard, there is very little support for this side of the insert, which is all the forces coming up against it. You know, compared to a CNMG tool, which all the force is going into it like that, or even better yet, a square insert like this. This is actually the best tool to rough with if you're going to do it, real heavy roughing, because it'll tend to push the tool. If anything damages the insert or something happens, it breaks or something, it'll tend to push the tool away from the cut. On this case, so this kind of insert, or to use the other edges on a CNMG insert, like using this edge to rough with going forward. But this kind of a tool, because of its negative lead angle, can actually get sucked into the diameter. You got to be kind of careful of that. It can damage your part, and particularly if you're trying to rough with a VNMG insert, this can happen too. And the tool can actually be sucked into the diameter. I don't use these typically to rough with. I might rough a thread relief with it because I can't get in there with of course with this tool here. But generally speaking, I just use this kind of a tool, or the VBMT tool like this has, just to do finish cuts with, and to rough a thread relief or maybe a little bit of a groove if it's a light groove. If it's a big, huge, wide, heavy groove, I'll go with the DNMG insert like this, and I can rough down an angle and back. Then I can rotate the tool and keep going back and forth if it's a wide groove on something, and do it that way. I prefer to do it with a turning tool if it's a big wide groove, roughing down angles and then reversing the tool and going back and forth, kind of like you saw a notch with a bandsaw, if you will. Then to use a grooving tool like this, you can do that. But the grooving tools have such wide faces on them, these bigger ones like this, and it tends to vibrate a lot, and it's harder to do it than just to turn it, if you can fit the turning tools in there, of course. So I don't know if I've explained that perfectly, but these are actually the two style inserts that I prefer. I don't know if you can see that. The CNMG and the VBMT. I use different tip radiuses depending on the application, but these are the two type of inserts I prefer to use. I use different brands, but this is the style. And I mostly use the CNMG 432 and a VBMT 332 insert. It's usually what I use in my tools. And like I say, it's just because I don't want to stock a whole bunch of inserts, a whole bunch of different kinds of inserts. And the grooving tools, I use the top-notch insert if I can, like this one. This has a good stability, these kind of inserts, and I like them. And the threading insert, of course, is like this. Now, I have used, like this is a buttress thread. I don't know if you can see that insert. And I use that top-notch insert for that because these are custom-made inserts. And I've actually ground inserts like this on my tool and cutter grinder, custom angles and stuff like that, because I have a tool I can hold that style insert in my grinder, and it would be very difficult to grind an insert like this style into some kind of custom sizes or profiles, or even had longer blanks and I ground deeper ones. I had to groove deeper with this style of top-notch insert, and also larger ones. This is a number 3 size, and this will be a number 2 size. See the difference there? And then they go to a number 4. I don't have one here, but a number 4 size is even quite a bit larger than this one. So anyway, those are some of the tools I use for boring or turning on the Mazak. Different kinds of heads. These I like these Sandvik style tools. They're kind of expensive, but they all mount up to, you can mount this head like on this bar, you could mount this head, you could mount this head, you could mount this threading head here, or this grooving head, all in the same bar with these serration couplings they make on these. This is a number 40 size. They make larger ones and smaller ones. This is, I think this is a 20. Yeah, this is a 20 size. I think that has to do with the millimeters of diameter. Like this is a 40 millimeter diameter and this is a 20 millimeter diameter. But see, this little head mounts exactly the same as this bigger one. It's 3 screws hold it on, and it's got serrations on the back. And this turns out to be a really good system. I like it. So I don't know if that explained anything or helped anybody, but I had a question. Somebody had a question on that on one of the comments on one of my videos about why I chose certain kinds of inserts over others. There is an insert that has an 80-degree tip. I should say it's a W, I can't remember, it's a W style insert. In other words, it's a trigonal shaped insert, kind of like, almost like the shape of this Shank, trigonal shape. And they put 80-degree angles on it, but I don't really care for that insert too much because I don't feel there's good support. I don't have a tool that holds that, or I'd show you. But generally speaking, what they do is they have a pin and the insert sets over the pin, and they have this wedge that pushes the insert up against the pin. But the wedge can wiggle around a little bit, and if there's variations in the hole and the insert, I don't think it repeats as good as these ones that come up against the sides of the insert pocket. So I don't really care for that insert. It's kind of like a roughing insert, like a CNMG insert, but like I said, I don't care for that tool too much, so I don't have any shanks that hold that tool. I like this this little Iscar bar. It works pretty good, and this is their small V-style insert, 35-degree diamond insert, and this tool works good. I have, and in my garage at home, I have OD turning tool for my little lathe that uses this insert as well for finishing. That's what I use on that machine. So that was just a couple little clips that I took here kind of on the fly, and it's mostly in response to some questions I had in the comments. But if this kind of thing is of interest to you all, I could make these videos very quickly, and I could just show a little things that I do and the reasoning behind it. So let me know in the comments if that's of interest, and thanks for watching.